This morning, I share with us some thoughts based on Judges 2 from verse 10 to 13. I begin this morning by making reference to the great Baptist preacher Martin Luther in a sermon delivered at Detroit Second Baptist Church on February 28th, 1954, a sermon delivered over 72 years ago. In that sermon, Martin Luther made the point: there is something fundamentally wrong with our world, and it is not because we don't know enough. We know more about maths, science, and philosophy than any other time in our history. He goes on to say it can't be that we have not progressed scientifically and technologically, for we have advanced so much than any other time in human history. If we are to find the answer to the question, we must go deeper than that to the very heart and soul of humanity. The problem in our world is that our moral genius lags behind our scientific genius. The means by which we live have outdistanced the spiritual ends for which we live. And so we are in a messed up world. The problem is with man's soul. We have not learned how to be just and fair, kind and loving. The great danger faces us today is not the great atomic bomb, Luther goes on to say. The real danger facing us is the atomic bomb that lies in the heart and souls of men, that can explode in the valleys of hate and the most damaging selfishness. If we are to go forward, we have to go back and rediscover some values we have left behind. The only way we can make this world what God wants it to be is for us to go back to rediscover some precious values we have left behind. With this at the forefront of my mind, I draw our attention to the text read earlier from Judges 2. We're told the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua, who led them across the Jordan into the promised land. But Joshua, the servant of the Lord, died, and the people served the Lord all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua. During this time, the Bible tells us that they honored God as they lived amongst the Canaanites. But after the elders died, we're told another generation arose that did not know the Lord, nor even the work which he had done for Israel. The Bible this morning wants us to understand that there arose a generation of people who had, one, no knowledge of God, no knowledge of the God who led their ancestors out of Egypt across the Red Sea. The people had no knowledge of the God who sustained them in the wilderness, the God who passed the Jordan, the God who enabled them to pull down the walls of Jericho. There arose a generation that had no knowledge of God embedded in their heart. They were not aware of the power of God, the hand of God, the mighty deed and works of God. They had no source of reference. But secondly, there arose a generation that had not only no knowledge of God, they also had no relationship with God. They felt no obligation, no sense of duty. It was an ungrateful generation that had abandoned the God of their ancestors. God had become like the common God, with whom they had mere acquaintance, but no personal relationship. They could not recognize and did not have an understanding of the God of their foreparents. So implicit in this text is a need for a people and a generation to rediscover some lost values. In this text, we hear the cry for us to turn around and look at what we have left behind, for to abandon, to reject, to disown the God of yesterday, the God of our foreparents, is to move away from the covenant the covenant promises of God. Israel in the text had walked away from the covenantal promise God made with their ancestors in search of other gods. They walked away in search of other ways of living. Let us look a little closer at the text then, sisters and brothers. Remember, as they were coming into the land of Canaan, God's plan was for them to destroy the Canaanites, but they did not. Israel lived amongst the Canaanites, but they were reminded not to adopt or to give in to the ways of the Canaanites. But story come to bump. For everything they were told not to do, they end up doing and becoming. The longer they lived in Canaan, the more they became like the Canaanites, adopting their ways, their values, their culture, and their gods. Israel lived so much like the Canaanites to the point they began to lose a sense of their own identity. Listen, my brothers and sisters, to the text. Israel rejected their God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for the gods of Baal. The Baal gods were the gods of success. The Baal gods were the gods of prosperity. So in an agricultural society, Baal gods were gods of good weather, abundance of crop and flocks, and the list goes on. So the God of prosperity, the God of wealth and riches, became their God. Israel chose their quest for prosperity over and above their faithfulness to Yahweh. I wonder if that is the story of our families today. Baal also means husband and owner. No wonder we read in the text, they rejected God, for they had found another lover, another owner. They were no longer loyal to Yahweh, but now they were in love with Baal. They worshipped. The text wants us to understand in the previous verses, not only gods of Baal, but the Ashtoreth. That is the god of pleasure, sex, love, and fertility. They gave themselves to the god of pleasure. I wonder this morning, brothers and sisters, if you're able to make connections with this text and with this reality, that as a people, as families, as a nation, as we gather in this service, talking this morning about my family, my mission, we must reflect critically on what is happening with our families. We must confess that we have lost some valuable things, and it is time for us to rediscover them. It is time to go back if we are to go forward. It is time to stop and to do an honest assessment if we are to move forward as a family and as a people. We need to do an honest assessment of our values and the things we have left behind as families. Because I believe we have advanced as people. I believe we have advanced as families. I believe we have even advanced as a world in so many ways. But I believe in our advancement, we have left some things behind. I believe in our progress, we have abandoned the ways and teachings of our ancestors. But more importantly, the teachings and the ways of God. The trouble with family and with our families is that we don't know. The trouble is not that we don't know enough. It's not that we don't have enough. The problem is that we have abandoned God in our pursuits. Like Israel, we have chosen to leave God behind and have exchanged God for the gods of Baal, prosperity, and the Ashtoreth, the god of pleasure. The problem is that as families, we have taken God out of our homes and have replaced God with the quest for prosperity and the satisfaction and gratification of self. We no longer teach our children about God. We teach them how to become prosperous. We don't teach them to have a relationship with God. We teach them how to live and to live life in this world, principles of pleasure. If we are to go forward, if we are, friends, to rediscover the lost values, as family, we must go back. We must go back to the things that are fundamental to what it means to be people and what it means to be God's people. Can I suggest that there arose a generation that did not know God? And because of that, they were living without deep roots. And you and I know that a tree cannot survive without roots. Can a tree with shallow roots survive? I say only for a short time, for it will easily be uprooted, tossed by the wind, and toppled by other obstacles. We have a generation, we have children who are growing without God and are like trees with shallow roots. They will sprout up, they will stretch up, but they will easily be toppled, tossed by the winds of this world, for they have no foundation on which to build their lives. The challenge with our homes is that we have provided our children with opportunities for learning, the books and the gadgets. We have equipped them to live in the scientific and technological age. And we're so proud this morning to talk about how they manipulate the phones, the tablets, and the televisions. But we have failed, for they know more about these gadgets than they know about the God who provides them. They know little about God. They know little about prayer. They know little about church and the place of church in their growth and development. We brag about our children, their placements, their achievements. We brag about our grandchildren. But for many of us, the truth is this morning, they want nothing to do with church and nothing to do with the God that we serve. And the only time that they will step through the church door is at our funerals. Yes, friends, there arose a generation that does not know God, want nothing to do with God. And part of that is our doing. For we have lifted up and we have promoted the gods and the goods of prosperity. We have lifted up and promoted pleasure and prosperity above a relationship with the true and living God. We did not get to this stage, friends, merely by coincidence. We got here because many of us have abandoned God and abandoned the ways of God and have neglected to pass on the legacy that we have received. And so we have a generation with shallow roots, for they are lacking depth, relationship. They are lacking knowledge of God. Not only that, but the text would also help us to understand that this generation, they are lacking a moral reference. And you and I know, friends, that the world is built on a moral foundation. Yet our children lack a moral reference, a moral compass, meaning they have no guiding principle. They lack a sense of right and wrong. They do not understand the difference between right and wrong because in today's world, you and I know that the line is blurred. They do not understand that some things are right because how the universe is structured, dictates that it is right and it is wrong. Today, the lines are blurred. Right and wrong is blurred. And it is now determined by how one feels, by how one reasons. There is no right and wrong in our world, and each person determines that for themselves. And when we get to that stage, friends, we are on the brink of chaos. And that is where our world is, for law and order no longer applies. Man and woman can attack soldiers and police. We kill each other because of how we feel, and we can walk into a room and shoot it up because I don't like some persons. the nation of Israel became shallow in their living. And today, so many years later, we find ourselves in the same predicament. And friends, they became shallow, and we too have become shallow because living and life is about prosperity and pleasure. But like Israel, God is calling us back to rediscover the true meaning of living, to go back to help our children and our family to understand that while success is important, it is not the measure of life. It is not worth losing relationship. It is not worth giving up our relationship with God. We have a responsibility to ensure that our children, our families are equipped with the principles and the truths and the teachings of God that will ground them to live in this world. It is the teachings and the truths of God that will keep them, guide them, and help them make sense of life. It is not science. Let us not put the cart before the horse. It is not science. It is not math. It is not CSEC, CAPE, and all the degrees that they will accumulate and all the accolades. What will ground our children and our family to live in this world is a truth concerning God and the teachings of God. So I say to all of us gathered on this platform, do not abandon God, and do not cause our children and our family members to abandon God in their pursuit for pleasure, prosperity, achievement, and success. That is why I believe Sunday school, family prayers are still important. And we need to invest in our children's spiritual growth and development. For in so doing, we are securing a generation. In so doing, friends, we are laying a foundation. In so doing, we are giving them deep roots to stand the test and the struggles of this world. In so doing, we are ensuring that we leave a lasting legacy, a legacy that is more than money, a legacy that is more than house and land, a legacy of faith in God and God's faithfulness to them. If we're to move forward as families, we must ground our story and this generation in the eternal truths concerning God's faithfulness. We must ensure that it is known that God remains and God will be faithful to us and to them in all of life. We must help them to understand that it is God who provides. It is God who gives success. We need them to understand that God's promise will not change, for God is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. God is calling us back as people, as family, as church, to return to lost values, to return to some truths, to return to eternal truths. It is not too late. You and your family can start anew. It is not too late to invite your family to prayer, to start teaching again children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren about God, to start teaching our nieces and nephews about the ways of God, the truths about God, the testimonies of faith, to start helping them to come back to understanding the place of God in their lives. What this world needs then, friends, is not more knowledge. What this world needs is not more scientific advancement. What our homes need is not more technological gadgets. We do not need bigger houses. We do not need fancier clothing. What we need is a return to the truths and the teachings of God, to return to the covenant and the promise of God. We need homes. We need families where God is at the center. We need, friends, families that take our children and nurture them in the cause of Christ. We need grandparents, parents, guardians who will hold fast to the ways of God and ensuring that that legacy is passed on to this generation and generations to come. Let us go back. Let us rediscover. Let us rebuild. Let us renew, because we cannot go forward without God at the center of our lives. Amen.